Tina, come home. There's nobody mad at you. My arms are open.
In March of 2017, a 44-year-old woman named Tina Satchwell disappeared. No warning, no calls, no note. 1 minute she was home, the next, nothing. Yukon is the kind of town where quiet hangs in the air like salt from the sea. You'll find narrow streets, small shops, and neighbors who nod at each other out of habit. Nothing ever really happens there, until something did. Her husband Richard said she needed time to clear her head, that she'd taken 2 suitcases and thousands of euros in cash, that maybe she'd left for good. But Tina wasn't the kind of woman who vanished quietly. She was lively, bubbly, someone who loved bold clothes, garage sales, and her dogs like children. She kept her house full of color and her wardrobe overflowing. The idea that she'd simply walk out and didn't sit right with the people who knew her best. Her phone was left behind. So were her dogs. So was her family. 4 days passed before anyone even filed a missing person report. Richard pleaded on TV for her return.
Tina, come home. There's nobody mad at you. My arms are open.
Begged her to come home. Said no one was angry, that she wasn't in trouble. His arms were open, he said. But not everyone believed him. There were gaps. Things that didn't add up. Friends began to whisper. Family grew impatient. The Gardaí started watching more closely. Searches were launched, fields combed, forests cleared. The house was swept once. Nothing came of it. Nothing concrete, no body, no evidence. Just a husband, a handful of stories, and a growing unease. Years passed. And Tina stayed missing. This is the case that haunted Yahal. A case full of questions no one could answer. Where did she go? Why did she leave? And who really knows what happened between March 20th and March 24th, 2017? Welcome to another episode of True Crime Mystery Vault. If you're ready to explore the full story, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below. Because this is just the beginning. And trust me, you won't want to miss a second of what comes next. Tina Satchwell was 19 when she met Richard Satchwell, 21, in Kiveton, near Leicester, England. She had moved into the house next door to Richard's, living with her grandmother, who raised her. They began dating, and by 1989, Richard proposed to her beside the lighthouse in the seaside town of Youghal, County Cork. That same town would later become their home. After getting married, they relocated to Ireland and eventually bought a multi-level terraced house on Grattan Street in Youghal. It wasn't fancy, but it was theirs. Richard worked as a truck driver. To supplement their income, they sold clothing and second-hand items at car boot sales. Tina had a deep love for fashion, always dressed up, always styled, even when money was tight. They had no children, but their home was full. They doted on their pets, a parrot named Peach, and 2 dogs, Heidi and Ruby. Money was always a concern. For years, they received assistance funds, but according to Richard, extra income always went to keeping Tina in new outfits. Clothes filled the home, some new, some used, draped in plastic across railings in different parts of the house. That was their life. Quiet, modest, and mostly private. Until March 2017, when Tina was gone. On March 24th, 2017, Richard Satchwell walked into a Garda station and reported his wife, Tina, missing. According to him, he hadn't seen her in 4 days. He told officers that Tina had been upset. Their pet parrot, Peach, had recently died, a loss that hit her harder than anyone expected. Richard said it was like losing a child for her. She hadn't been the same since. He described their marriage as strained, said she'd been distant, that they'd been having conversations lately, heavy ones, about life, about space, about stepping away. He claimed she left on her own, that she took 2 suitcases and around 26,000 euros in cash, money they had saved over the years, and kept hidden in a box inside the house. When he checked that box after she vanished, it was empty. Richard didn't sound frantic, at least not at first.
28 years we've been together, 25 years married, and it's just completely odd. It's just completely thrown me because it's so totally out of character for her. Well, she got up in the morning. I did my usual thing, cup of tea, slice of toast. And she asked me if I'd drop over to Dungarvan, which is only like 20 minutes drive away. And when I returned, something like 2 hours later, she just wasn't there. I found her keys on the ground as I went through the front door. So I just said she's gone out for a walk. And when she didn't come back, naturally you get a bit sickly feeling, I suppose. We'd had conversations of late, so I said, right, she's gone down to a member family in Fermoy. So I give her a couple of days. I had to go down to visit my doctor on the Friday. And then when I found out nobody had seen her, it was like everything just fell away. You know, it's just totally odd that there's been nobody say, oh, I've seen her, you know, especially with living here on the main road. My original thoughts is she got up to have a break, to get her head straight, because she's been very upset in recent months. She's had a few crises within the family over the last few years. You know, I think it took its toll, and that's why I think she got up and walked out.
And as the hours turned into days, he went public, pleading for her return. On camera, his voice cracked.
A couple of hours. And now it's 3 months. Tina, come home. There's nobody mad at you. My arms are open. The pets are missing you. I just can't go on not knowing. Even if you just ring the guards, let people know that you're all right.
But not everyone was convinced. There were questions, whispers. Why would Tina leave her dogs behind if she was planning to be gone for good? Why didn't she take her phone? Why didn't she tell anyone? Richard had answers. He said traveling with pets was difficult, that Tina didn't want to be traced, that she just needed space.
Well, I'm hoping that Tina's out there and she's going to get in touch. I don't want to even, to be honest with you, go down the road of thinking the other way because I won't be able to cope.
The silence lingered, and Tina stayed gone. With the missing person report filed and the days stretching on, Garda and Youghal launched a formal investigation. They began where most disappearances start, with surveillance. Officers pulled CCTV footage from nearby homes, shops, and traffic cameras, scanning hours of recordings for any sign of Tina walking down the street with luggage, hailing a taxi, or even stepping out for a walk. But there was nothing. No grainy glimpse, no shadowy figure, no movement at all. At the same time, investigators checked her bank records, her phone, her social media. Every account was frozen in time. No messages, no transactions, no digital trail. If Tina had truly planned to leave, she hadn't used the usual routes, and she hadn't contacted anyone since the day Richard said she vanished. Richard continued to insist that she'd left voluntarily, that she needed time to clear her head, that she was grieving, that things at home had been difficult. But to Tina's family, none of that made sense. They knew Tina. She was attached to her pets, especially her 2 dogs. She wouldn't have just walked away from them. And if she had money, why wouldn't she at least let someone know she was okay? The doubts spread. Quietly, but steadily, a social media campaign was launched. Photos of Tina, her bright clothes, her smile, were posted and shared across Ireland. Friends and neighbors joined the search. The media picked up the story. Richard went on camera again. He said he missed her, that he still believed she'd come back, that he was holding out hope. But outside the frame, the questions were multiplying. Why report her missing only after 4 days? Why so little concern in those early hours? And why was there still no sign of her, anywhere? What began as a missing person case was starting to feel heavier. By June 2017, 3 months after Tina was reported missing, Gardaí secured a search warrant for the Satchwells' home on Grattan Street. Richard, they learned, would be away working. It was the moment investigators had been waiting for, an unguarded window to examine the property without interference. A team of more than 10 personnel entered the house. Inside, they were met with conditions that surprised even seasoned officers. The floors were soiled with dog feces. A birdcage sat untouched, uncleaned. Clothing, hundreds of items, some still in packaging, others used, hung on plastic-covered rails throughout different parts of the home. The house felt less like a residence and more like a warehouse. It was chaotic, unkempt, but it was also quiet. No immediate signs of a struggle. No blood. No forced entry. Nothing to indicate Tina had been harmed there. Still, the search wasn't fruitless. Forensic officers spent hours combing through each room. While no physical evidence turned up, no DNA, no fingerprints out of place, investigators did seize 2 computers. Over the following weeks, those computers revealed something odd. Something that had nothing to do with Tina, at least on the surface. Emails. Dozens of them. Richard Satchwell had been in communication with someone calling himself Mr. James from an organization claiming to be an international monkey rescue. Through multiple email threads, they discussed the purchase of 2 marmosets, Terry and Telma. The correspondence was strange, personal, urgent. It wasn't a passing interest, it was ongoing. Repeated transactions were traced through Western Union. Money sent regularly to this so-called rescue group. And yet, no monkeys ever arrived. He was desperate to get the monkeys. That much was clear. But the most disturbing detail wasn't how much he paid. It was when he stopped paying. The last email he sent to Mr. James was dated March 20th, 2017, the same day he claimed to have last seen Tina. In it, Richard wrote that he had nothing left to send. That if the monkeys didn't arrive soon, his wife was going to leave him. Those were his words. The implication wasn't lost on Gardaí. Tina disappeared that day, and the man closest to her had just linked her potential departure to a transaction involving exotic pets and a faceless contact overseas. Richard had also told officers that Tina took 26,000 euros in cash from a savings box they kept hidden in the house. But now, with access to his financial records, detectives saw something different. Their shared bank account was in the red, not just once, regularly. And his credit lines? Maxed out, at times overdrawn. Richard insisted the money was real, that they made extra cash at car boot sales, that he kept the savings hidden. But for a couple surviving on government assistance, and for a man still wiring money to buy monkeys, it didn't add up. What began as a strange footnote in a missing person case was quickly becoming a red flag. And for the first time, detectives weren't just asking where Tina had gone. They were asking what Richard might have done, if he believed she really was going to leave him. In July 2017, nearly 4 months after Tina's disappearance, Richard Satchwell made an unexpected call to the Gardaí. He said he had found something. 2 suitcases left near the large recycling bins outside a Tesco supermarket. To him, the discovery felt like a message. The image of 2 suitcases abandoned in plain sight. It chilled him. He claimed it brought back memories of Tina, who he had said walked away with 2 of her own. Richard didn't open them. Instead, he took photographs and contacted the authorities. Gardaí arrived at the scene. The suitcases were collected and sent off for forensic testing. With no other physical evidence in the case, this new lead generated a quiet buzz. Not just among investigators, but in the press. What if these were Tina's bags? What if they held answers?
They took the suitcases away and they have been forensically examined over the last number of weeks. We ran the story yesterday that the suitcases were found. Gardaí in Middleton are anxious to detect if anybody unconnected to the investigation left the suitcases there to be disposed of, or if somebody is actually playing mind games with Richard Satchwell, or is somebody trying to thwart the investigation in some shape or form. And my understanding is that the suitcases were empty. Okay,
empty.
But empty. That's my understanding. But Richard didn't open them, so he doesn't know that. But my understanding is that there was nothing in either of the suitcases. But a hairbrush has been sent away for DNA testing. Sometimes, if it's an urgent case, the Gardaí will speed things up, but still, science is science. It can take a while, and we don't know if they have linked the suitcases for definite to Tina Satchwell or not.
But when the test results came back, there was no breakthrough. No DNA. No belongings. No trace of Tina. The suitcases were, as far as science could tell, completely unrelated. Still, the timing, and the person who found them didn't go unnoticed. Whispers began to circulate. Was it just coincidence that Richard happened to stumble upon 2 empty suitcases 4 months after claiming Tina had left with 2 of her own? Was someone toying with him, or was he trying to redirect attention? For investigators, it didn't shift the facts. But for the public, it added a new layer of unease. Each time the case seemed to stall, something strange surfaced. And each time, Richard Satchwell was standing close by. In the spring of 2018, just over a year after Tina Satchwell vanished, Gardaí received what they described as a credible tip. It pointed them to a dense stretch of woodland near Castle Martyr, known locally as Mitchell's Woods Loop. The area sits less than an hour from Tina's home in Youghal. Quiet, remote, the kind of place someone might go if they didn't want to be found. The tip included mention of a strange man seen behaving suspiciously in the area.
Gardaí at Middleton Garda Station are investigating the disappearance of Tina Satchwell from Youghal in County Cork, who was last seen in March of 2017. An incident room is established in Middleton Garda Station, and a team of detectives are working on Tina's disappearance. To date, there have been 220 separate lines of inquiry conducted. This has included liaison with Interpol, and today we are conducting a search here at Mitchell's Wood, Bridgetown, Castle Martyr in County Cork. We are looking for evidence in relation to Tina's disappearance, and we have, for the purposes of this search, restricted access to this area.
Over 60 Gardaí, supported by roughly 30 military personnel, were deployed. The search stretched across 40 acres. Each section was methodically examined, trees marked, soil shifted, evidence bags filled with anything that looked even remotely out of place. Back in Youghal, hope flickered. Maybe this would be it. Maybe Tina was there. But after days of searching, testing, and cataloging, nothing. No clothing, no trace, no body. Whatever clue had led them into the woods didn't lead them any closer to Tina. Still, Richard remained at the center of it all. Not charged, not officially named, but always hovering near the suspicion. His TV interviews continued. He repeated the same story.
If I was asked to take a lie detector test, I would take one. My house was searched without my knowledge. And the Gardaí didn't find anything to suggest anything untoward. I live on a main street, so my coming and goings are seen. So, I don't know why people are being so malicious.
Are you an innocent man?
I am. I'm innocent. I'm innocent of any wrongdoing.
There was no proof of what happened to Tina. But to many, there was only one person who might know. As the months turned into years, Richard Satchwell kept talking. In interviews, he didn't just share memories, he shared his version of Tina. He described her as unpredictable, said she had a temper, that she could change suddenly, warm one moment, angry the next. He claimed there had been violence, that Tina had struck him before, that she would lash out sometimes without warning.
One day, my wife is going to turn back up, or she's going to get in touch with the Gardaí. One way or another, this will all come out, and in time it'll all prove that I've done nothing wrong.
According to Richard, it wasn't just once or twice. He estimated that over the course of their years together, she had threatened to leave him more than 200 times. He spoke softly, said he loved her anyway, that she was a great woman, despite everything, that he endured her outbursts in silence. In one interview, he called her his trophy wife, said he doted on her, bought her clothes, even when money was tight, that he liked her to look good, for herself and for him. But those closest to Tina told a different story. Her friends never saw the woman Richard described, not once. No angry tirades, no violent episodes, no wild mood swings. They remembered someone upbeat, friendly, loyal. The version of Tina painted by Richard, unstable, abusive, erratic, didn't match what others had seen firsthand. Was Richard describing the truth? or just trying to rewrite the story of a woman who could no longer speak for herself. By 2022, the case had grown cold. There had been searches, interviews, and tips. There had been emotional appeals, but no trace of Tina Satchwell had ever been found. No movement, no breakthrough, just a missing woman, and questions that refused to fade. That year, the investigation changed hands. Superintendent Anne-Marie Twomey took over the file. She approached it differently, not as a mystery to be solved through luck or confession, but as a puzzle built on overlooked pieces. She called in outside help. One of those brought on board was Dr. McCullough, a forensic archaeologist known for working on cold cases involving buried remains. He specialized in situations where victims had been hidden, sometimes in plain sight. After reviewing the case, McCullough shared a theory. If Tina had died inside the house, it was unlikely she had been taken far. In domestic cases, he explained, victims are often buried close. Very close. He looked at photos taken during the original search in 2017. Subtle structural changes inside the Satchwells' home. New stair boards, unfinished plasterwork, recently added paneling. Small things, but unusual in a house that hadn't otherwise been updated. One thing stood out: the area beneath the staircase. In earlier images, it had looked accessible, open. But in newer ones, that space was blocked off, closed behind what appeared to be a hastily constructed wall. It was enough for Superintendent Twomey to push for a second warrant. And this time, they weren't coming just to look. They were coming with a cadaver dog and shovels. In October 2023, Gardaí returned to the Satchwell home on Grattan Street, this time with a second warrant, fresh eyes, and a cadaver dog trained to detect the scent of human remains. It didn't take long. On the very first day, the dog showed heightened interest around the staircase, specifically the second step. The stairs themselves were new. The wood was raw, untreated, and unpainted. So was the plaster on the adjacent wall. It didn't match the rest of the house. Underneath the staircase, detectives noticed something else: a brick wall. Newer than the rest of the home's structure, poorly built, out of place. They decided to come back the next day and excavate. When they returned, the cadaver dog was brought in again. This time, it stopped completely. Locked into what handlers call a full freeze, a trained alert signaling the presence of human decomposition. The dog stood fixed in place, facing the wall under the stairs. Detectives began to dismantle the wall. Behind the bricks, compacted soil, then plastic, black plastic sheeting tightly wrapped. Moments later, they saw it. A hand. A clandestine grave, just under 3 feet deep, hidden beneath the stairs for over 6 years. The remains were carefully removed. Tests were ordered. Dental records were reviewed. Soon, it was confirmed. The body was Tina Satchwell. She was wrapped in plastic. Shards of broken glass were found across her face. She wore only a dressing gown. After 6 years of speculation, theories, and hope, the search was over. Tina had been there all along, buried, inside her own home.
Glad inside. They're glad that she was found, but they're very sad, really, And there was an awful eerie feeling there around last night. And today as well, I think,
I think people are happy that they found her and she can be laid to rest. And we're happy about that.
Within hours, Gardaí arrested Richard Satchwell and charged him with the murder of his wife.
Give him room, lads. Yep.
It wasn't his first time speaking with investigators. He had given interviews back in 2017 and again in 2021. In both, he told the same story: that he left the house to run errands, and when he returned, Tina was gone. No note. No clue. Just missing. But now, with her body found under the stairs, that story began to shift. Faced with the evidence, Richard offered a new version of events. He claimed it wasn't planned.
That she did hit you in the past, that there were fights and that there were arguments. I'm not saying that she was an abusive partner.
Tina was one of these. No, she's a great woman. I have not got a bad word to say about her.
But then you said that, but then you said that she beat you.
Often, if I was out and about and I seen something in a shop window that I knew would be Tina's style, it wouldn't matter how sexy it would be or anything like that, I'd buy it.
You'd buy it, yeah. You liked her to look well.
Oh, yeah, that's, so I suppose some people can say, oh, she's a trophy wife. When you got somebody that beautiful on your arm, naturally to make you look good.
He said Tina attacked him, that she was holding a chisel and had been scraping plasterboard when he returned home that morning. According to Richard, she came at him. In the struggle, he claimed he tripped and fell, and Tina ended up on top of him, the chisel still in her hand. He said he feared for his life. To stop her, he reached for the belt of her dressing gown and pulled, tightening it around her neck to lift her off him. Within seconds, he said, she went limp. Richard told Gardaí he didn't know what to do, that he held her for hours, that he sat with her on the couch afterward, that he thought about dressing her in something she loved, maybe one of her favorite outfits, but didn't follow through. Instead, he moved her to a chest freezer he kept in the shed. Days later, he said, he dug a shallow grave under the stairs inside the house. He wrapped Tina's body in plastic, lowered her in, and built a wall to cover the space.
Detective Sergeant Noonan repeatedly put it to Richard Satchwell that his story didn't add up. He said it was most likely a physical impossibility, that the scenario he had described could have caused Tina's death.
It was the first time he'd admitted she died in the house, and the first time he said he was the one who killed her. In April 2025, Richard Satchwell stood trial for the murder of his wife, Tina. The case was heard at Dublin's Central Criminal Court, and it drew national attention. For years, the public had watched the story unfold in fragments: a disappearance, strange emails, fruitless searches. Now, for the first time, the full version was being tested under oath. The prosecution made their position clear from the start. They argued that this wasn't a mistake, not a struggle gone wrong, not a man defending himself. This, the prosecutor said, was cold, calculated murder. Richard, they said, had motive: years of mounting financial stress, growing resentment, and the fear that Tina was going to leave him for good. When the last email to the monkey rescue suggested his marriage was on the line, 4 days later, Tina was gone. The state presented the timeline, the inconsistencies in Richard's story, the fact that he had constructed a hidden grave under the stairs, that he had concealed her body for more than 6 years, and that he never reported any alleged attack until the moment her remains were discovered. The defense took a different approach. They claimed that Richard had acted out of self-defense, or at worst, that Tina's death was the result of manslaughter. A tragic accident, they said, not a murder. Their argument hinged on the idea that Tina had attacked Richard with a chisel, and that his actions, though fatal, had been a panicked attempt to save himself. Only one witness was called for the defense: Tina's half-sister, Lorraine Howard. She testified that Tina could be difficult, that she had a temper, that she and Richard had what she described as an odd relationship. But even Lorraine stopped short of calling Tina violent. She said her sister had never laid a hand on her. For 5 weeks, the jury listened. Over 50 witnesses were called. Evidence was dissected. Statements scrutinized. They were asked to determine not just what happened on March 20th, 2017, but what Richard Satchwell's intentions were when it happened. Was he afraid for his life? Or had he simply decided he could no longer control hers? On May 30th, 2025, after 5 weeks of testimony, 50 witnesses, and nearly 8 years of unanswered questions, the jury returned with a verdict. Richard Satchwell was found guilty of murder. There was no visible reaction in the courtroom. No outburst, no breakdown, just the quiet sound of a case finally reaching its end. A few days later, on June 4th, he stood before the court one last time for sentencing. The judge didn't mince words. The concealment, he said, the lies, and the brutal betrayal of someone who trusted you make this an especially chilling case. Richard Satchwell was sentenced to life in prison, mandatory, without parole. For Tina's family, it wasn't closure. It wasn't justice in full. But it was something: a verdict, a name, a consequence. After 6 years, her story had finally been told in full, not by speculation or headlines or guesswork, but in court, under oath. And with her name spoken aloud, one last time. Her story is not just a tragedy, it's a warning. A reminder of how easily domestic violence hides behind locked doors, of how many cases go unsolved, of how long silence can last, and a reminder that no one just vanishes. Not really. In the wake of the trial, calls have grown louder for better protocols, more training, and faster intervention in suspected domestic homicides across Ireland. To act sooner, to dig deeper, to listen harder. Because for Tina, help came too late. But her story may help someone else, and that is how she will be remembered. If you found this story important, please like, subscribe, and share to keep these stories alive, because silence should never be the final word. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Was justice truly served?